Hello and welcome to part 5 of our video series on building a Node, Express and Postgres based API. Today we're going to be running through testing our HTTP server. We, in the previous video, built out our HTTP server to get us started. So now we're going to run through some tests just to make sure that it starts up okay, and also just to test that when our entire application starts up, that our HTTP server starts up as well. So what we're going to do is just head over into the unit test that we've already got available for our AppStarter. Just refamiliarize ourselves with the code that's in here. So when the start services is called, we validate the environment provided config, and then we call this app http server.start. And what's missing at the moment from this test is validating that when this service gets appstarter.startServices gets called, that this actually gets called in here as well. So first thing that we're going to need to do, because this is now changed from a synchronous to an asynchronous function, this AppStarter, we will need to change the test to be asynchronous so that we await for this start services to finish. And what we're also going to need to do, similar to what we've done for the config here, we're also going to need to mock out the HTTP server imports as well that we're going to be using, because we import the app HTTP server from HTTP server here. So in order to assert that it's been called, we have to mock it out so that it's replaced with mock functions. All we need to do now is simply add another assertion here, and what this is going to do is just assert that HTTP server dot app HTTP server dot start dot to have been called. So similar to the config. So what it's going to do is it's just going to check that HTTP server appserv HTTP server dot start has been called when this starts. So what we're going to do is just going to run unit test, and we're just going to scroll up and have a look for the number of tests that are passed, and we've got back to 3 passing tests, and it's also testing that this has been called as well. So that's a good place for us to start. And the next thing that we're going to do is look at adding tests for our HTTP server as well. So we'll just go back into here. When the application starts, what happens is this app HTTP server.start is called, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that when this all happens, that this promise ends up resolving. So all we're going to be asserting is that when we call start, this promise makes it all the way through, and app.listen is called, and then this resolve is actually called off the back of it as well. So let's add ourselves an index.unit.test.js file, and what we'll do is we'll just require the app HTTP server from not from equals require dot, and that's because we're importing it from an index. We'll add a describe block, and that's going to describe HTTP server, which is the domain that we're in. Then we're going to add another describe block, which is going to describe the function that we're testing within here, and this is going to be app HTTP server factory, actually not factory, app dot start. And now we can add tests for this. So what we can do is we can do test when start is called, the promise resolve to be undefined. what we're going to need to do here, similar to what we've done in our test files here, we're going to actually need to mock out any dependencies within here. So the dependencies that we're going to need to mock out are going to be the express dependency, because we've got express using this here, and what we want is our unit tests to not actually really care about what's going on with express itself as a library, but just make sure that it goes through all of these bits here. Now, Express is a bit of a tricky library to mock out, and I'll show you why now. So we'll finish up writing our test as to what we're expecting to happen, and then I'll show you what happens when we mock things out. So we're going to have expect, going to have app http server dot start dot resolves dot to equal undefined. So what this is doing is slightly different syntax to what we've used before, so I'll just run through it. So we've got app http server.start, and what this does is it returns a promise. So with Jest, what you can do is you can use the resolves syntax, which says once this promise has resolved, we're expecting it to equal undefined. So if for some reason the promise doesn't resolve or it rejects for any reason, then this test would fail. But what we're actually looking out for is for it just to pass. What you would normally expect to do with Jest is you would just expect to do jest.mock, and then you do express. But the challenge with Express is that the import from Express is both a function, and it also has additional properties on it that are associated with that function. So when automatically mocking it with Jest, this won't actually work as we're expecting it to, which is a little bit annoying. So what we need to do is actually mock out Jest mock out Express in a slightly different way than what we would do here. So I'll talk you through what we're going to be doing. So we'll do const express equals, and what happens with Express is it'll be a function, and that function should return it'll return a set of helper functions that come with it. So you've got use, which is used to build up the middleware inside, and then you've got listen, which is what starts the server, and this listen function actually takes an argument, which will be let's just call that port, because that's what it actually is. It's port, and then it has like a callback function, and what that should do is actually when that listen is called, what we want it to do is actually just call that callback function for us. So that's the part that deals with when we do express like that and we call express. Now what we also want to do is make sure that we can call express.json, which we make use of as part of our middlewares here, and that's used to pass any incoming JSON-like objects. So what we'll do is we'll actually just attach express.json as a jest function, like so. And what you can do, if you don't want Jest to automatically mock your dependencies for you, what we can now do is we can actually just pass in our own version of the Express, which has been mocked out to meet the requirements that we have. So once we run these tests now, what we should find is that we are up to 4 passing tests. This test now asserts that the promise resolves perfectly fine within the HTTP server when that starts, and that there's no errors thrown or anything like that unexpected that's going on in there, and it mocks out the Express piece for us. Now, one thing that I haven't covered off that is going to be useful now that we're starting to add more and more test files is that what is a good practice to get into is to clear up all of these mocks every time you run a new set of tests, or every time you run a test. And that's to make sure there's nothing left over from your previous tests that are going to start impacting on your future tests. Now, the way that you do that is by using some inbuilt hooks that Jest support, and one of those hooks is a before each hook. And what that says is that before each test that runs, this piece of code or this function within here is going to be executed. And what you can do is there's a number of hooks you've got: before all, before each, and after all, which you can use to either set up information for your tests or tear down information after you finish your test. But for the purpose of what we need, what we're going to do is jest.clear all mocks, and that'll just clear up all the mocks for us before each test, just to make sure there's nothing left over that's going to be impacting. And what you want to do is you want to add this to each of your test files, just to make sure that they're all fully clean after you've run your tests, or before any new tests run. What you can see is we've got 4 passing tests now, and we've gone back up to our 100% test coverage, which is what we were aiming for. What we'll do in the next video is I've got some ideas around adding some better logging to our application. So that's going to provide us with a really nice logging solution that's going to be useful for all the different types of errors and info logs that we're going to want in our application. So in the next video, we'll run through setting up an application-wide logging solution. I'll see you soon.